A hydrophone is a microphone that works underwater. It is a simple device, a pressure-sensitive element sealed inside a waterproof housing connected by cable to a recording system on the surface. In the late 1950s, the United States Navy deployed arrays of hydrophones across the Atlantic Ocean floor. The purpose was not science. The purpose was the Cold War. The hydrophones were part of a classified surveillance network designed to detect the acoustic signatures of Soviet submarines. The stations were secret. The personnel were cleared. And on one of those stations, in Bermuda, a Navy engineer named Frank Watlington began hearing something that was not a submarine. The sounds came through at certain times of year, long, low, rising and falling in pitch, with repeating patterns that lasted minutes at a time. Watlington, who had been trained to identify the acoustic profiles of military vessels, recognized immediately that this was biological, something alive, something large. He recorded the sounds, and then, for the next 8 years, he told almost no one. His reason was not secrecy protocol. It was fear of the whaling industry. If whalers learned that whale sounds could be detected by hydrophones, they could use the technology to find and kill the animals more efficiently. Commercial whaling in the 1950s and 1960s was driving multiple species toward extinction. Watlington had spent years listening to what he believed were humpback whales. He was not willing to hand that information to the people who were hunting them. That decision, to record and to stay silent, is the detail this story returns to at the end. Hold it. In 1966, Watlington was put in contact with Roger Payne, a research zoologist trained at Harvard and Cornell, working in New York, whose background was in animal acoustics. Payne had studied how owls locate prey by sound, a subject that required patience, precision, and an ear trained to detect structure in noise. He asked Watlington for copies of the recordings. Watlington provided them. What Payne heard restructured his career. The sounds were not random. They were not simple calls, territorial markers, or mating signals of the kind that birds and frogs produce. They were compositions. Long sequences of sounds organized into phrases, phrases grouped into themes, themes strung together into songs that could last 30 minutes or longer. The songs repeated. They could be sung continuously for up to 24 hours, and every male humpback whale in a given ocean was singing the same song at the same time. Humpback whales have no vocal cords. They produce sound by forcing air through massive nasal cavities, generating tones at frequencies low enough to travel hundreds of kilometers through water. The sounds range from deep, rumbling moans to high wails that rise and fall like a voice searching for a note. When Payne graphed the recordings on spectrograms, the structure was unmistakable. Repeating motifs, thematic development, variation within a recognizable framework. This was not noise. This was architecture. Payne and a fellow researcher confirmed in 1967 that the sounds met the formal definition of song: structured, repetitive, and variable. His wife and research partner, Catherine Payne, later discovered additional layers. The songs changed every year. New phrases were added, old ones were dropped. The songs never reverted. They evolved forward. Always. And the longer songs contained structural repetitions that functioned like rhyme. The whales were not just singing. They were composing, and every year they composed something new. The scientific implications were significant. The cultural implications were larger. Payne understood that data alone would not save whales. Populations were collapsing. Blue whales reduced to roughly 1% of their pre-whaling numbers. Humpbacks in the North Atlantic down to a few thousand. Governments were not going to act because of a paper in a scientific journal, but they might act because of a feeling. Payne's insight, the one that separates him from dozens of other competent marine biologists of his era, was that the recordings themselves were the argument, not the analysis, not the data about the recordings, the sound. If people could sit in a living room and listen to an animal singing a 30-minute composition that changed every year and was shared by every male in the same ocean, the emotional response would do what no policy paper could. He described his strategy with a bluntness that scientists rarely use. He wanted to build whale songs into human culture, by any means necessary. Anyone who wanted to use the recordings was welcome to them. Any damn thing anybody wanted to try seemed fine to him. In 1970, Payne released Songs of the Humpback Whale, a 35-minute LP that became the best-selling nature recording in history. Musicians wove the sounds into their work. The recordings were included on the Voyager Golden Record in 1977, launched into interstellar space as a message from Earth to whatever might find it. Whale songs left the planet before most humans had heard them. In 1979, National Geographic included a flexi disc of whale recordings in its January issue, distributed to 10.5 million subscribers, the largest single pressing of any record in history. The effect was cumulative. By the end of the 1970s, whale songs had entered living rooms, classrooms, concert halls, and spacecraft. And the political consequence followed. Over the next several years, the U.S. passed laws protecting marine mammals, and in 1982, the International Whaling Commission voted for a global moratorium on commercial whaling. The moratorium remains in force. The connection between a vinyl record and a global policy is not metaphorical. It is documented. Payne founded a nonprofit dedicated to whale research in 1971 and continued studying whales for the rest of his life. The organization's Whale Song Library eventually grew to over 6,000 hours of recordings, the largest collection in existence. The cost of Payne's career was not dramatic. There were no feuds, no stolen specimens, no destroyed research. The cost was quieter and more corrosive. Decades of work on a single subject, underfunded for most of them, in a field that the broader scientific establishment considered peripheral. Marine acoustics was not where the grants were. Conservation biology was not where the prestige was. Payne was famous to the public, but not always influential within the institutions that controlled research funding. The irony is structural. The man who proved that the right sound at the right time could change global policy spent much of his own career struggling to be heard within his own field. In his final years, Payne turned to an idea that had followed him for decades, that whale communication could be decoded. Sperm whales communicate using codas, short, rhythmic sequences of clicks that vary by social group, suggesting something analogous to dialect. The clicks travel through thousands of meters of water, produced in the whale's enormous head, the largest brain of any animal that has ever lived. Payne was involved in the early stages of a project now using machine learning to attempt translation. He did not live to see its results. Roger Payne died on June 10th, 2023, at his home in Vermont. He was 88. 5 days before his death, bedridden, still working, he published an essay in Time. He wrote that as his time ran out, he was possessed by the hope that humans were smart enough to put the saving of other species at the top of the list of important jobs. 50 years ago, people fell in love with whale songs and joined together to ignite a conservation movement. It was time to listen again. The hydrophone from the opening, the one in Bermuda, the one connected to the Navy's submarine surveillance network, the one that Watlington used to record sounds he kept secret for 8 years, is gone. The station was decommissioned. The equipment was reclaimed by the sea. Payne called those recordings the greatest humpback whale performances he had ever heard. He said they would never be repeated. And the songs themselves can never be heard again, because humpback whales change their songs every year. The sounds Watlington captured were sung once. They traveled through classified Navy cables, onto magnetic tape, into a biologist's office in New York, onto a vinyl record, into 10 million living rooms, onto a spacecraft leaving the solar system. And then they were finished. The whales moved on. They are still singing. The songs are different now. And the man who made the world listen is buried in Vermont. Next time on Buried Record, the coldest place on Earth. A research station where the sun disappears for 6 months. The diaries of Antarctic overwinterers, from a 1912 expedition to a crew last year, describe the same symptoms, the same breakdown, the same strange resilience, 100 years apart, the same words. That story is coming.